There is something happening inside the male body after 40 that most doctors never bring up during a routine visit. It is not dramatic, it does not show up on a standard blood test, and for most men, it starts so gradually that they explain it away as stress, bad sleep, or just getting older. But here is what most men never realize. What feels like aging is often something entirely different, something that can actually be supported. And in this video, you are going to understand exactly what that is. If you are a man over 40 and you have noticed changes in your energy, your drive, or your performance, this is for you. Not because something is broken, but because your body may be sending you a signal that most men ignore for years before they finally pay attention. By the end of this video, you will understand what that signal is, why it matters, and one simple habit that may influence this more than most men realize. Let's start at the beginning. Picture a man in his early 40s. He is not old, he is active. He goes to work, comes home, takes care of his family. From the outside, everything looks fine, but there is something that has been slowly changing. He used to wake up in the morning with energy, with a kind of quiet confidence that just felt natural. He used to feel present with his partner, connected, engaged. But lately something feels different, not broken, just quieter. Like a signal that used to come in clear is now full of static. He does not talk about it. He does not even fully admit it to himself. He tells himself he is just tired, that things will get better when work slows down, that this is just how it goes after 40. Does any part of that feel familiar? Because if it does, there is a reason for that, and it has less to do with age than most men believe. It has to do with something happening in the body on a level that is almost invisible, something that researchers and health professionals are paying increasing attention to. And once you understand it, a lot of things start to make sense. Here is what we need to talk about first. Blood flow. Now, before you think this is something basic, stay with me, because this is not a conversation about cardiovascular disease or cholesterol levels. This is a conversation about something far more specific, far more connected to the kind of vitality and performance that actually matters in a man's daily life. And this is where things start to get very interesting. Inside the walls of your blood vessels, there is a molecule that your body produces naturally. It is called nitric oxide. And for most men under 35, the body produces it efficiently, consistently, and in the amounts needed to keep blood flowing smoothly throughout the entire system. Nitric oxide is essentially a signal that tells your blood vessels to relax, to allow blood to move freely to every part of the body that needs it. When nitric oxide levels are healthy, the body functions the way it is supposed to. Muscles get oxygen, the brain stays sharp, energy levels feel stable throughout the day, and when it comes to intimacy, the physical response happens naturally, without hesitation, without pressure, without the mind getting in the way. But here is the part most men never hear about. After 40, the body's ability to produce and maintain nitric oxide begins to shift. Researchers have observed that nitric oxide availability tends to decline with age, and this is not a minor shift. Some studies suggest that by the time a man reaches his mid-50s, nitric oxide production may be significantly lower than it was in his 30s. Not because he is unhealthy, not because something went wrong, simply because of the natural changes that happen in the vascular system over time. And when nitric oxide levels drop, the blood vessels lose some of their flexibility. They become less responsive. Blood flow becomes less efficient. Not enough to trigger an emergency, not enough to show up as a crisis, but enough to affect the way a man feels. Enough to create that quiet, frustrating sense that the body is not performing the way it used to. Now think about what that actually means in real life. It means the man who used to feel confident and ready in intimate moments starts to feel something else. A hesitation he cannot explain, a kind of pressure that builds before it even needs to. He starts overthinking, he starts anticipating, and that mental pressure creates its own cycle, because the body responds to stress with blood vessel constriction, which makes everything worse. And now there is a physical issue feeding a psychological one, and a psychological one feeding the physical one. And neither of them gets addressed, because most men would rather say nothing than admit that something is changing. This is where the silence begins. And over time, that silence has real consequences, not just in the bedroom, but in the way a man carries himself, the confidence he brings to conversations, the ease he feels in his own skin, the way he shows up for the people he loves. When a man stops feeling like himself, it touches everything. But here is something most men completely overlook. This process is not a one-way street. The body is not simply declining and nothing can be done. The vascular system is responsive, it is adaptable, and when given the right signals, the right nutrients, the right environment, it can produce more nitric oxide. Blood vessels can regain some of their flexibility, circulation can improve, and men who focus on this specific mechanism report noticing real differences. Not overnight, but consistently, over weeks and months, in ways that matter. This is where the science becomes genuinely interesting. Researchers studying cardiovascular health and male vitality have been paying close attention to specific compounds found in nature, compounds that the body actually uses in the process of making nitric oxide. Not synthetic chemicals designed to force a result, but natural building blocks that support a biological process the body already knows how to do. One of the most well-studied of these is an amino acid called L-Citrulline. L-Citrulline is found naturally in certain foods, particularly watermelon, and what researchers have observed is that the body converts L-Citrulline into another amino acid called L-Arginine, and L-Arginine is a direct precursor to nitric oxide. In other words, the body uses it as a raw material in the production process. Now here is something interesting about L-Citrulline specifically. When L-Arginine is taken directly as a supplement, much of it gets broken down in the digestive system before it even reaches the bloodstream. But L-Citrulline has a different absorption pathway. It survives digestion more effectively. And once it reaches the kidneys, it converts to L-Arginine where the body can actually use it. And this is where things start to get really interesting. Some researchers studying this pathway have noted that combining both L-Citrulline and L-Arginine together may produce a more sustained effect on nitric oxide availability than either one taken alone. The two compounds appear to support the same pathway through slightly different mechanisms, and together they may offer more consistent support to the vascular system over time. But L-Citrulline and L-Arginine are not the only compounds researchers have been paying attention to. There is also a plant that has been used in traditional health practices for thousands of years. You may have heard of it. It is called Panax ginseng, and in modern research settings, it has been studied for its potential role in supporting vascular function and male vitality. What researchers suggest is that certain active compounds within Panax ginseng, particularly a group called ginsenosides, may help support the body's natural production of nitric oxide in the blood vessel walls. They appear to interact with the enzyme responsible for producing nitric oxide in a way that may support its activity. Not by forcing the body into anything unnatural, but by potentially supporting a process that already exists within the vascular system. There are also studies that have looked at Panax ginseng in the context of male energy, focus, and performance under stress. And while the research is ongoing and results vary, the observations have been consistent enough that this plant continues to be a subject of active scientific interest. Now remember that drop-in nitric oxide we talked about earlier, the one that starts after 40 and gradually affects how a man feels, how blood moves through his body, how present and confident he is in intimate moments. This is the exact pathway that these compounds are being studied in relation to. And this is why understanding the mechanism matters so much. Because when most men notice something changing, they do not look for the root. They look for a quick fix. A pill that masks the symptom. Something that forces a result without addressing why the body stopped producing what it needs naturally. And those approaches may work in the short term, but they do not support the underlying system. They do not help the body recalibrate. They create dependence instead of resilience. What researchers are increasingly interested in is whether nutritional support of the nitric oxide pathway can offer a different kind of result. Not a forced response, but a restored capacity, a body that over time is producing more of what it needs on its own, responding more naturally, functioning the way it was designed to. And this distinction matters enormously, because the goal is not to feel artificially boosted for a few hours. The goal is to feel like yourself again, consistently, reliably, not just on the right night with the right circumstances, but as a baseline. Let's pause here for a moment, because this is the part of the conversation where most men start to feel a small shift, a kind of recognition, because everything we have covered so far is not abstract, it is not theoretical, it is describing something that may already be happening in your body. And that recognition carries with it a very specific feeling, hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope that comes from a late-night search and a too-good-to-be-true promise, but a grounded, rational hope, the kind that comes from understanding a mechanism, from seeing that the body is not simply broken, that there are pathways, that there are things that can be supported naturally, that the man you were at 35 is not a past version that is gone forever. He is a biological state that your body may still be capable of moving toward. And that is worth sitting with for a moment. Now let's talk about why diet alone often falls short. Because you might be thinking, if these compounds exist in food, why not just eat more of the right things? And it is a fair question. L-Citrulline is in watermelon. L-Arginine is in nuts, seeds, and certain meats. Ginseng can be found in some teas. So why does it not seem to be enough for most men? There are a few reasons. The first is volume. To get therapeutic levels of L-Citrulline from watermelon alone, you would need to consume an impractical amount of it every single day. The concentrations in food, while real, are not high enough to move the needle on nitric oxide production the way research doses do. The second is absorption. As we get older, the digestive system becomes less efficient. Nutrient absorption decreases, the gut environment changes, and compounds that were well absorbed in our 30s may not be processed as effectively in our 40s and 50s. This is one of the reasons why dietary recommendations that worked earlier in life stop producing the same results. The third is consistency. The body responds to consistency over time. One good meal, one healthy day, 1 week of better choices does not rebuild a depleted pathway. What the research suggests is that sustained daily nutritional support at meaningful concentrations is what allows the vascular system to gradually recalibrate. And that kind of consistency is difficult to achieve through diet alone in the context of a real man's real life. And this is where the case for targeted supplementation starts to make practical sense. Not as a replacement for lifestyle habits, not as a shortcut, but as a way to deliver the specific compounds the body needs in the amounts that may actually support the pathway consistently enough to see a difference over time. For men who want to explore a natural way to support this process, there is a resource available in the description below. It covers a specific approach to nutritional support for the nitric oxide pathway in men over 40. No pressure to act on it. Just information for the men who are ready to take this seriously. Let's come back to something important now. We talked about the psychological dimension of this earlier. The silence that most men live in, the hesitation they feel but never name, the pressure that builds over months and quietly reshapes how they see themselves. That psychological layer is real, and it deserves the same attention as the physical one. Because one of the most damaging things that happens when a man starts to lose confidence in his body is that he starts to withdraw. He pulls back from intimacy. Not because he does not want it, but because he is afraid of another moment where the body does not respond the way he needs it to. He becomes hyper-aware of every sensation. He starts monitoring himself, and that monitoring is the opposite of presence. It creates distance where there used to be closeness, silence where there used to be ease, and his partner feels it. She may not know what is causing it. She may interpret the withdrawal as a loss of interest, as emotional distance, as something about her. And now the relationship is carrying a weight that neither person knows how to name. This is one of the real costs of the blood flow conversation that never happens. Not just the physical performance, but the intimacy, the connection, the ease that two people used to feel together. The way a man shows up fully, without hesitation, without mental interference, the feeling his partner has of being desired and met. All of that is connected to the same underlying mechanism, the same vascular pathway, the same molecule. And here is what I want you to hold on to from everything we have covered today. Your body is not simply aging against your will. Your body is responding to signals, to the nutrients it receives, to the habits you build consistently over time, to the support you give the systems that regulate how you feel, how you perform, and how you show up in your own life. The nitric oxide pathway is real. The role of blood flow in male vitality after 40 is real. The research on compounds like L-Citrulline, L-Arginine, and Panax ginseng is real and ongoing. And the possibility of supporting your body in a way that moves it back toward the version of itself that felt most natural to you, that is real too. It does not require dramatic change. It does not require you to overhaul your entire life. It starts with understanding what is actually happening inside the body, which is what you did today. And then it requires consistency. Small, daily decisions that over time add up to something meaningful. The men who feel the biggest difference are not the ones who made one dramatic intervention. They are the ones who understood the mechanism, made a practical decision to support it, and stayed consistent long enough to actually feel the result. That is the kind of change that is available to you, not a promise, not a guarantee, but a pathway that is backed by biology, supported by research, and accessible to any man who decides he is not done feeling like himself. And remember that molecule we talked about at the very beginning, the quiet signal inside the blood vessel walls, the one most men never think about, the one that starts to shift after 40, in ways that feel like aging, but are actually something entirely more specific, something that can be supported, something that responds to the right inputs over time. That is where your vitality lives. Not in the past, not in some version of yourself you think is gone, but in the biological systems that are still working, still responsive, still capable of being supported in the right way. Take what you learned here today and do something with it. If you found this helpful, subscribe to the channel for more content about men's vitality after 40.